I'd like to introduce you now to Lydia O'Meara. Lydia is one of our students from Cairns. She's currently specialising in nutrition, and she's also a PALS facilitator. She supports our first year students by organising weekly study groups in biochemistry. She also works in the emergency department of the Cairns Hospital, organising educational workshops for clinical staff in rural hospitals. She recently travelled to Paris as a delegate to the OECD Public Forum with the Global Voices Initiative. As part of her scholarship, Lydia undertook research paper investigating the role of nutrition as a key tool in closing the gap in Indigenous health inequality in Australia. Please join me in welcoming Lydia. Thank you.
Thank you. So how did I go from feeding sheep on a sheep station in outback Queensland to discussing food policy at an international French forum? So in my presentation today, I want to share with you the voyage that led me from being a farmhand to an international delegate in Paris, France. I hope that I might inspire you to embrace the imperfect events of life, and that I might encourage you to confidently launch on the next part of your career. As Franklin Roosevelt once said, to reach a port we must sail. Sail, not tie at anchor. Sail, not drift. As a 6-year-old, I never just woke up one day, sat at the breakfast table and announced to my brothers and sisters, just so you know, I will attend the OECD Forum in Paris when I am 27 years old to discuss food policy. I admire people who know early on what they want to do with their lives, because I was not one of those people. In fact, the day that I applied for the Global Voices Research Scholarship, I did not even know what the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development was. I will confess, I called in sick to work the day that I applied for the scholarship. I had studied all weekend to complete assignments. As I'm certain many of you can relate to, juggling work and study as a uni student is a bit of an ongoing struggle. I am fortunate, I have a great part-time job as a project officer in the emergency department at Cairns Hospital. I organise the ED doctors to deliver education workshops to the remote hospitals across far north Queensland. When I am not busy herding cats, which is our affectionate description of what we call trying to organise really busy doctors, I am at home studying my Bachelor of Medical Sciences. As most of you already know, I am majoring in nutrition with the goal of becoming a dietitian later on. So this day, I had a bad headache, hence the sick call. I was bored, and I was actually at my computer at home checking my CQU student email. Yes, we do check our emails. Up pops an email. CQ University students can apply now for full funded scholarships to take part in Global Voices delegations to Paris and Istanbul this year. Oh la la, Paris. I applied for the research scholarship because I really wanted to visit Paris. Who wouldn't be tempted by the idea of a trip to visit the country that specialises in eating over 400 different kinds of cheese? Or where you could spend all day cycling the French countryside, exploring medieval castles, followed by a 3-course dinner with a little local wine. Google kindly informed me that the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, or the OECD, is an international organisation that brings countries together into one room to discuss solutions of how to create economic growth that benefits all people. For example, when it comes to food, the OECD recommends that countries invest in providing affordable food to vulnerable populations so that their children can grow strong, do well in school, and have the education and health to secure work. Therefore, good food can empower people with an opportunity to break the poverty cycle. This resonated with me, and I thought this is the kind of public policy that I'm really passionate about. However, no event ever occurs in isolation, and there were multiple events across my life that led up to my opportunity to apply for the Global Voices Scholarship. Now bear with me, and please imagine that my journey to Paris was actually a 15-year boat trip or a 15-year lifelong voyage across multiple oceans via a luxury cruise liner, of course. Now, how did my journey begin? I grew up on a sheep station in outback Queensland. We lived 2 hours from Cunnamulla, which is a small outback town on the Queensland-New South Wales border that did not have a high school. I was actually homeschooled all the way through to grade 12. I actually loved being homeschooled because I had the opportunity to rush through all of my schoolwork in the morning and then play on the farm in the afternoons. So how did my ocean voyage begin? So Rockwell Station, the sheep station that I grew up on, is located in the middle of a desert. So as you can imagine, I began my ocean voyage with a very little yacht, or rather, a kayak. I had no skills at paddling or at trimming the sails. In other words, I had no life experience or really much academic knowledge. I was a feral tomboy, according to my sisters, who watched me spend most of my spare time helping my dad build fences and muster sheep. Our sheep station was actually the size of Singapore, just to put it in perspective. So some days we would camp out on fencing trips. And I remember, because my dad wasn't actually much of a cook, we would eat baked beans for dinner. And we would sleep, fully dressed in boots and 2 jackets to keep warm on greasy shearers' mattresses in old homesteads. My mum despaired when I was in high school. Apparently I told her one day, I do not need to learn maths because I will be a checkout chick and the cash register will calculate for me. 7 years later, I took a maths bridging course with CQU. I had no idea I would end up a nutritionist. If anything, I thought I might end up being a vet when I grew up because I raised a baby animal of every kind my brothers and I could find on the farm. Kid goats, baby kangaroos, a lizard, a piglet, baby lambs, even a baby swan. I did not know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And in fact, I am a perfectionist and I struggled to make decisions for fear that I will make the wrong choice. Choosing my future career was the scariest decision to make as a kid, and one I avoided. At school, I would rather not start an assignment for fear I could not do it properly than to write a paper and then be disappointed in my own work. I am really thankful to my mum, who coached me to push past my fear of being imperfect. In fact, my mum went so far as to encourage me to embrace flaws, because imperfect people and imperfect experiences are full of character and therefore a lot more fun. My mum always asked me, how can you steer a ship if it is not moving? In other words, if you sit at home, how can you expect to find exciting adventures to enjoy? So I packed up my unused kayak, I grabbed a couple of paddles, and I resolved to make lots of flawed decisions. I had no idea where I was going or ultimately what I wanted to do. I just knew that I did not want fear of being imperfect to control my life. I wanted to get out there, embrace it, and enjoy it. So I took my first kayaking lesson when I was 13 years old. I set off from Cunnamulla to volunteer as a community aid worker in Southeast Asia for 3 weeks. I worked as a bricklayer, helping to build a community hall/church in a small village outside of Phnom Penh, Cambodia. In Cambodia, I was privileged to experience the beauty of a really gentle people who worked hard to overcome the challenges of everyday life. Cambodia helped me appreciate the uniqueness of another culture, and it taught me again how privileged I am to live in Australia. Overall, the experience fueled my belief that everyone is entitled to an equal opportunity to reach their full potential in life. I returned to the sheep station in Australia with more than just memories. I came home with a mysterious Asian illness, because who doesn't? During high school, my health deteriorated rapidly, I lost weight, and I became weak to the point where I couldn't work on the farm. Doctors ran multiple tests. They informed me that my immune system was overwhelmed and that my organs were struggling to function, but they could never actually pinpoint a cause. Due to my compromised immune system, I developed multiple food intolerances. And these food intolerances became so severe that at one stage all I ate was fish and brown rice for about 6 months. This meant that I developed adrenal fatigue, which is essentially the body shutting down. On the rare occasions that I left the house for doctor's appointments, I was pushed around in a wheelchair. Fortunately, I was already homeschooled because I physically would not have been able to attend a full day at school. To cut a really long story short, I was unwell for about 5 years, or in other words, my kayak completely capsized, and I felt like I was treading water for about half a decade. My parents took me to multiple specialists and health practitioners. I studied when I could, and I did manage to graduate grade 12 when I was 17. In the meantime, my family moved from outback Queensland to tropical North Queensland. And I did slowly start to get better my first year out from school. I picked up a small part-time job as an administration officer at the local hospital. I started out small. I worked 2 days a week in the beginning. This gave me time to concentrate on my diet. I fought to be fit. I ate nutritious foods, and eventually my body became stronger, and slowly I built up my health, and along with that I built up my work hours as well. A boy distracted me for a little while. It was not a completely unpleasant distraction, and I did later marry Brad. So in the year Cyclone Yassi hit Queensland, I was busy, drifting through life, working at my full-time job at the hospital. I felt like I was running endless circles a little bit in the infamous rat race. I toyed again with the thought of tertiary study, but I was scared I would choose the wrong major, again, going back to my fear of being imperfect. I had a strong interest in the power of food due to my food intolerances in high school. My friends and family reminded me of my passion for food, and due to their encouragement, I emailed a handful of local dietitians. One local dietitian kindly let me volunteer as her assistant at group education sessions. I volunteered during my days off work, and I helped teach newly diagnosed diabetics and young overweight children how to cook healthier food. This whole experience inspired me to apply for university. I was 6 years out of high school, and I was nervous about my academic abilities. I had not completed a SAT test, so I applied via alternative entrance. My husband was a mechanic's apprentice, so I knew I still needed to work to financially support myself. So I actively started seeking a part-time position in the hospital. Life is somewhat ironic. I actually got offered 2 part-time jobs, which would have made up the equivalent of a full-time job. It did go through my head, and I thought, what if I don't get a university offer? Maybe I should accept both of these jobs and cover all my bases, because I didn't want to, luck out. But I was determined, and I thought, I really do want to unfurl the sails on my new career, and I really finally want to leave port. I want to invest in myself and move to the next step. And my mum's voice kept reminding me, she's like, how can you steer a ship if it is not moving? In other words, be daring, take that next step and embrace it. So I turned down the second job before I found out if I was accepted or not. And I'm really glad I did. Fast forward to March 2015. I'm sitting at my home computer and I'm dreaming of ways to secure a fully paid trip to Paris, France. How do I persuade Global Voices? And how do I persuade CQ University that I am the perfect candidate for a research scholarship? If I have learned anything in my life, it is that no experience is ever wasted. For my research application, I remembered what I learned in Cambodia, and I wrote about my passion for equity and equality. I reflected on my experience with food intolerances, and I wrote about my belief in the power of food. These traits, combined with my volunteer work and a high grade point average, secured me an interview in the final selection round. And thankfully, Global Voices saw something in me, and they did give me the scholarship. I highly recommend the Global Voices Research Scholarship. Researching my paper into nutrition and Indigenous health inequality gave me a great opportunity to network with local professionals and dietitians in the Cairns and Cape York area. In addition to having my research paper published, I also had an opinion piece published on the social justice blog, The New Internationalist, and my course coordinator has since approved credits for my work. and she then went on to nominate me for a CQU Summer Research Scholarship. So the actual Global Research Scholarship, so once I'd finished my research paper, we then went to Paris, France for the OECD Forum, and it was there that we had invaluable private meetings with a lot of international leaders and policy developers. For example, at the forum, I had a great discussion on food policy with the Director of Agricultural and Trade of the OECD. And at the end of the meeting, he actually encouraged me to apply for an internship, something I'd never actually ever considered, applying for an international internship. So the whole experience has really enhanced my studies, advanced my future career, and therefore, if any of you guys are considering it at all, I would highly encourage you to apply for the career boost, not just the trip overseas. So I encourage you to embrace the imperfect events of life, because it is the journey of our lives that shapes our future. The next few years of my life are unfolding differently to what I expected. As part of my research, as you know, I investigated the role of nutrition as a key tool in closing the gap in Indigenous health inequality in Australia. I won't give you all the details, but the professionals that I met and the evidence that I found during my research has broadened my horizons, and I have a greater passion and appreciation now for the power of nutrition public policy at a domestic and an international level. So life may not turn out the way we plan, however, it is these unexpected events that can shape us into who we are meant to be. I encourage you to embrace the imperfect events of life. I encourage you to believe in yourself. You are the captain of your ship and the master of your fate.